Good evening and welcome to Join in Hydro Cafe, a new space for young researchers in hydrogeology. Our mission is to give visibility to novel research work and to create a network of junior researchers. As you already know, she is Nuria Naranjo and I am Carolina Guardiola Albert. This time we have a joint initiative with the European chapters of the International Association of Hydrogeologists, the IAH, which today launches a new webinar series named Where Groundwater Meets. The European branch of IAH agreed to be hosted by our Hydro Cafe series. So today we will have a double audience for our webinar. Marco Petita, Vice President of the IAH for Western and Central Europe, is here to better explain how this new webinar series will be developed during next months. Hi, Marco. Welcome to Join in Hydro Cafe.
Hi. Thank you, Carolina and Nuria, for your warm welcome in your Hydro Cafe team. I'm very happy to join you and the whole IAH Spanish chapter. And I really appreciated the idea to invite young researchers to share their results with the groundwater community. This is exactly the spirit of the new European IAH initiative, to give the possibility to interact with international colleagues in these difficult times, to meet all the new friends under the common umbrella of the groundwater science. We have a great responsibility with young generation and with the society in general to provide and to preserve the best freshwater resources on the earth. And we must work together at European and worldwide level to reach these results. After this first webinar hosted by Hydro Cafe series, we will continue with monthly meetings touching different topics and involving several countries, at least along 2021. I invite all interested people to follow us and to join us for future webinars. Thank you.
In Hydro Cafe, we have sessions that are held on Wednesdays every 2 weeks, with the first talk given in English and a second talk given in Spanish. We would like to encourage young researchers interested in participating to send us an email with a proposal. In the chat enabled in YouTube, you can leave your questions after the talks, and these will be answered during the session, depending, of course, on the time available. Otherwise, you will find the answers in the chat. Today, we are live for the 7th time, and our first speaker is Syed Mustafa. Hi, Syed. You have to unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Nuria. And thanks for inviting me in Hydro Cafe, as well as I would like to thanks Marco to invite me as the first speaker for the IAS webinar series. And now I would like to start. I want to share my screen, then I will start. Is that okay?
It's okay. While you share your screen, I would like to ask you some questions. We used to speak a bit with the speakers about your research. Nice. And where did you study your PhD?
I completed my PhD in Vrije University of Brussels in Belgium.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what you are going to present today? Is it related with your thesis or is about the project that you're working on now?
Yeah, it's a part of my PhD research work.
Okay. So now the floor is yours, and now you can share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. I mute my micro.
Okay, can I start now?
Yes, the floor is yours, Syed.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everybody to my presentation. I'm going to present part of my research work, and the title of the presentation is A Novel Uncertainty Estimation Framework to Quantify Uncertainty in Groundwater Modeling. At first, I would like to acknowledge and I would like to thank my PhD promoter, Professor Maraiki, and my two other co-authors for their support during these studies. Imagine what will happen if there is another pandemic like COVID-19. We all know that COVID-19 pandemic is devastating. However, global groundwater crisis could be even more dangerous. The reality is 1 out of 5 people don't have access to safe drinking water at this moment in the world. 2 billion people do not have access to safely managed drinking water. 3 billion people don't have basic hand washing facilities at their home. And it has been forecasted that water scarcity could displace 700 million people by 2030. So the best time to prevent next pandemic is now. But what's happening with the groundwater aquifers or groundwater storage tank under the ground? The research shows that more than 50% of the world's largest aquifers are being depleted. And groundwater depletion is a serious threat to global water security. But the question is, why groundwater is depleting? Is it because of the climate change? What are the influence of human activities? What will be the future? To answer those questions, reliable prediction of groundwater level is important. Reliable prediction is important to ensure correct policy making and decision support, to ensure sustainable groundwater management strategies, and in taking adaptive measures accordingly. Groundwater flow models have been used in predicting groundwater levels and decision support. However, there is a risk due to uncertainty. Reliability of the model prediction is influenced by the different sources of uncertainty. There is uncertainty from the conceptual model structural errors, like from the geological representations, or from the definition of the initial conditions, groundwater surface water interactions, and boundary conditions. There are also uncertainty from the model parameters, the representation or definition of the different model parameters like hydraulic conductivities or specific storage. There could be homogeneous or heterogeneous. The actual information are rarely available about this parameters, so there are uncertainty. Another sources of uncertainty in groundwater modeling is the input data, like groundwater research. It could be point data or it could be especially distributed data. Similarly, groundwater abstraction. Again, it could be point or especially distributed. How many number of wells are there and well location and actual amount of water pumping. We don't know about this details information. So there are also uncertainty. Another sources of uncertainty in groundwater modeling is the biased observed output variables. We are using different observed variables to calibrate our models, but every measuring device has some errors, and so there are some uncertainty there as well. Then question is how to compute this uncertainty. There are many methods to compute. We are going to talk about a Bayesian technique. Let's say we have a model or a system and we have an observed output variable. Then we can define our model parameters, and based on the model parameter we can have output variables. And then based on these output variables we can compare with the observed variables, and we can use the likelihood function and we can update our model parameter accordingly. Then with the new model parameters we can run our model again to have the new simulation, and then again you will update our based on our likelihood function. And finally, based on our likelihood function, we can identify the posterior distribution of our model parameters. As you can see, this inverse modeling is mainly dependent on the likelihood functions. However, this likelihood function depends on residuals and residuals assumptions. One of the important assumptions of the residual is the residual variance are constant. And so far in groundwater modeling, the groundwater modeler are considering that residual variance are always constant. However, this is not the case always. Residual variance sometimes increases with the simulated head or it could be decreases. And this, if it's increase or decrease, if it's not constant, then it's called heterodastic situations. If it's constant, then we call homostochastic situation. And as you can see this, the residual variance, the assumption of the residuals are not always true. And that's why residual do not always satisfy the assumption of the likelihood function. So we need to improve in this assumption. And to solve this problem, a new generalized likelihood function was introduced in our approach. Another major challenge in groundwater modeling is to quantify the uncertainty of the spatially distributed input data like groundwater research and abstraction. To solve this problem, groundwater research and abstraction multiplier are introduced in our proposed methodology. Now, how these multipliers works? Let's say we know the estimated groundwater abstraction of a specific location. We don't know the exact amount, but we have some estimation. Then we can define a multiplier to have a corrected abstraction data. Then we can define the prior distribution of these multipliers. Then based on the likelihood function, we can have a posterior distribution of the multipliers. Traditionally, model prediction approach of groundwater model mainly focuses on the model parameter uncertainty. However, consideration of different sources of uncertainty is important to have a reliable model prediction and decision support. That's why we are presenting a general and a novel integrated Bayesian multimodal uncertainty estimation framework. And this framework, the result of this framework has already been published in water resources research journals and environmental modeling and software journals. And if you are interested for more details about that, you are welcome to follow these two journals. Now, how this model works. At first, we develop our models in ModFlow model. Then we couple this model with the dream code. Then model calibration and uncertainty analysis are performed simultaneously with three different scenarios. In the first scenarios, we consider only the model parameter like a traditional ways. Then based on the likelihood function, we can have a posterior distribution. In the second scenarios, we introduce heterodastic error model parameters along with model parameters. Then again, based on our likelihood function, we can have a posterior distribution. In the third scenarios, we introduce the research and groundwater abstraction multipliers. Then again, based on our likelihood function, we can have a posterior distribution of these parameters. Finally, then based on this posterior distribution, we run our model again to have a prediction uncertainty. And with these three different scenarios, we can identify the parameter, input, and heterodastic error model uncertainty. And this framework is applied in an overexploited aquifer in northwestern part of Bangladesh. And this is basically agriculture dominated area. About 80% of the total area is cropland, mostly used for the rice production. Now here is some results of this our approach. This figure shows the percent observation captured within the parameter uncertainty band for the three different scenarios, both for calibration period and for validation period. During the calibration period, as you can see for the scenario 1, that's why we consider only the model parameters. The observation captured only 1.5%. And in the second scenario, when we incorporate the heterodastic error model parameters along with the model parameters, then observation capturing capacity increased to 8.5%. But when we incorporate the input uncertainty along with model parameters and heterodastic error model parameters, then observation captured capacity improved to 38%. And this is the same trend you can see in the validation period. It even goes to up to 46%. That's why we are concluding the consideration of model input uncertainty increase the reliability of the model prediction and accuracy of the uncertainty bound. So far, we are discussing about the input uncertainty, parameter uncertainty, and measurement errors. But another important error in the groundwater modeling is conceptual model uncertainty or conceptual model structural uncertainty. And neglecting this uncertainty of the conceptual models may result in unreliable prediction. That's why we combined the fully Bayesian approach that we have been explaining so far with Bayesian combined model averaging to quantify the uncertainty from the conceptual model errors. And this combination of these two is our integrated Bayesian multi-model uncertainty estimation framework. And this is the first attempt to apply a fully Bayesian multi-model framework in the groundwater modeling. Okay, now how this framework works. Initially, we will propose alternative conceptual model based on the geological representation we need. And then, as I explained before, we can define the model parameter, heterodistic error model parameters, and the groundwater and abstraction multipliers or input multipliers. Then based on the likelihood function, we can have a posterior distribution. And then based on the posterior distribution, we can have a prediction uncertainty for the model 1. Similarly, we can have the same for the model 2 and also for the model 3. Then finally, by using Bayesian combined model averaging, we can have a weighted model predictions. Here, this figure shows the one result from our framework, and this figure shows the groundwater level prediction uncertainty, and the gray color is showing the uncertainty associated with model parameters, measurement, input, and conceptual model structure. As you can see, and red color is showing the observation, and you can see almost all the observations are within our uncertainty band, and it shows that 95% of the observation can be captured within the 95% parameter uncertainty band. So our frameworks provide more reliable prediction and accurate uncertainty bands. And if we compare this parameter observation captured capacity with individual model, as you can see, individual model can capture up to 38% of the observation, while our framework can capture up to 95% of the observation. So this framework improves the accuracy and reliability of the model prediction. Here it should be mentioned that it's not only increased the observation captured capacity, but also it reduced the uncertainty as well. Also, it's reduced the root mean square error. Here in these figures, the dotted color is showing without considering input uncertainty, and the solid color is showing with considering input uncertainty. As you can see, when you incorporate the input uncertainty, the root mean square error is decreasing. However, the lowest root mean square has been obtained from our framework. So this framework results in lower root mean square errors compared to any individual model ensemble. That's why we are concluding that this framework is useful tools to have a better and more reliable model prediction and accurate uncertainty bounds. So here are some conclusions and policy recommendations. Our frameworks improves the accuracy and reliability of the model prediction and uncertainty bounds. Policy planning and management strategies should be based on the prediction result, considering all sources of uncertainty. Scientific community should consider different sources of uncertainty during their modeling to provide sufficient information to policymakers. And policymakers and politicians should act accordingly and should not ignore anymore. If we ignore, like we did during the viral outbreak warning, there will be another awful crisis within just few decades. So we should act now, and this is the only way to avoid another awful crisis. And we should not forget reliable prediction will ensure the accurate decision, and thereby it will ensure a sustainable future for our next generation. That's all about my presentation today. Thank you. And you are welcome to follow my paper for further questions.
Thank you, Syed. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. While wait for the questions in the chat, I don't know. Maybe Marco wants to make some comments about your presentation.
Yes, thank you. First of all, congratulations, Syed. I really appreciated your presentation, your model, and also the fact that you consider your technical approach inside a large vision that include, of course, our societal duties. I really appreciate also your approach to the problem. About questions, technical question, I have only one about this time series data and the frequency of data you need to apply your approach. Is it independent, or you need some long data series or a special frequency of data acquisition?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Marco, for your comments and for this nice question. As you know, groundwater model is a data intensive model. So you need data, but it depends on your objectives. It does not mean that you need a very long time series. Even you can use one year data or few months data for your model calibration. It depends on your objectives, for which purpose you are going to use the model. So the data length and data frequency totally depends on the objectives. As it especially distributed models, the special distributed data is always you need, and it's the more data you have is always better to reduce the uncertainty. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Syed. We have some questions in the chat. I will try to ask them for you. The first one is Nabila Jalal. It says that I understood this person. I don't know if he's a girl. I think it's a girl. She understood that your model predicts the amount of water in the future. Not sure about that. This would be the first question. And then she asked how such model can help the farmers in developing countries to use groundwater for crop production.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the question. And the groundwater models is using for the sustainable groundwater management. And developing country, like I am originally from Bangladesh, we are mainly dependent on rice, and you know rice rice is another. It's called water loving crops because it needs a lots of water. So in especially in dry season, we are mainly dependent on the groundwater. So to have a sustainable groundwater is important for the future crop production as well. So if we don't have a sustainable groundwater management policy, we will be out of water for the crop production. So it is important to have a sustainable groundwater policy, sustainable groundwater management. With this sustainable groundwater policy, it will in turn help for the sustainable crop production as well. So it is important to use the sustainable groundwater policy by using model and of course considering all the different sources of uncertainty in the policy plan.
Okay, thank you. Then Klaus from Denmark, I think, he congratulates and says thanks to first webinar from the IAH, and he wants to congratulate you for your presentation. And then Jaime Gomez, he says that his impression is that you get reliable models at the cost of having much more uncertainty predictions. Do you want to make any comment?
I was reading his comment as well, and as far I understood, maybe he want to mention that it will be computationally expensive because we are considering all the different sources of uncertainty Maybe that's his point. And I agree with him that it will be computationally very expensive, because if you want to get more and more, if you consider all the different sources of uncertainty, and if it's a big model, because it's especially distributed data, it will be computationally very expensive. However, with the computer technique evolving so fast, there are many now. There is supercomputing facilities available, so we can avoid this computational problem with these supercomputing facilities. Yeah.
Okay. And Alberto Casillas, he asked, what's the dream version that you're applying?
Yeah, at this moment we applied to the Dream ZS, ZS or ZS, you can say. Yeah.
Okay. And Mara, that she was presenting also in the Hydro Cafe a few weeks ago. She asked, did you try to see if and how much the model uncertainty decreases by having longer observation time series or by having a higher frequency of such observations?
We didn't, in fact, actually compare with the different longer time series, how can it reduce, but we checked that with the different sources, that with input or with the model parameter and conceptual structure itself. And if you have a more information, model uncertainty is reduced. This is the for sure very important point. And the one thing is, if you incorporate the input uncertainty, if you consider the input uncertainty, then it's increase the reliability of the model prediction as well. However, if your conceptual representation is not accurate, then even if you increase the time series very longer, it will not help a lot. So conceptual representation is also very important along with the data as well. But we didn't specifically consider different time series and frequency.
Okay. I think there are no more questions in the chat for the moment, but I have one. Because I know that predicting how the aquifer behaves, taking into account the uncertainties, is the good way to manage an aquifer. But I think these tools sometimes cannot be handled by the administrators who take the decisions on the aquifer. So how do you think we could make it easier for the groundwater managers to understand and to use and to play this kind of models?
Okay, that's a very important question, and thanks for this very nice question. Yeah, you are right. That's very often the groundwater manager are not have the very sufficient knowledge to manage these types of tools. One way of helping this is that we can some expert who knows about this modeling and things, they can make this helping for this specific aquifer or a specific region. Then the manager can take the decisions, because we should consider all the different sources of uncertainty as we mentioned. Then the people who knows more details about that, they can take this all the considerations, and then they can make the policy planning, a policy recommendation, so that manager can decide, politician can decide, or the water manager can decide. That could be one option. Another option is specifically groundwater manager. We can make some training so that they can use these tools directly, because it will not be very difficult. If you give them some training, then they can use them directly as well. I think these are the two options that we can follow for the further improvement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you. There is one more question. Mustafa says, did you use visual or processing mode flow for this research?
We use processing mode flow for this research. Yeah.
Okay.
But as you can see, this we cannot use the user interface here for these things. We have to convert everything in the MATLAB, then we use in the MATLAB for the processing everything. But it was processing mode flow. Yeah.
I profit that I'm making the question. Did you use Modflow 2005?
Yeah, 2005. You are right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think now we don't have more questions. I'm checking YouTube. I cannot see any more questions. So before going with the next speaker, I would like to give again the floor to Marco. Before I give him the word, I would like to thank Marco for joining us today, for all the dissemination work that you have done, that we are profiting in today. All the joint Hydro Cafe team wishes success for the webinars when groundwater meets. We will follow these webinars as members of the IAH. And if you need more help for anything, you know where we are.
Thank you very much. And no, I am in depth with you and the Hydro Cafe group, not you with me, absolutely. And I wish you the best success of your initiative, and I will try to join you in the future. And especially let me apologize in advance with Vanessa because I have to leave the session right now. So I'm sure that she will have a wonderful presentation, and I will see on the YouTube, because as you didn't remember until now, but I know that the videos remain available for the people that want to see in the next future. And of course, we will keep in touch for the next initiative. Thank you very much, and good luck, Vanessa.